What's good, YouTube family? Salute to everybody involved in this piece. Okay, lawyers and everybody have spoken out, and you got people in this situation who's also said their piece in it. This is a bad situation for a whole lot of people, but what we do know, attorneys are speaking out. Now, in this case, you got Muwop, C-Thing, Los, and everybody else there. Attorney representing the guys. He spoke out and proclaimed they're innocent. We're going to get to that, but let's pay these bills first. You know what I mean, gang? Salute to the smoke, gang. Hit the like button, hit the notification bell. Let's rock out. Attorneys have spoken in the case of these guys, and let's hear them out.
Participation. Fine.
You know what I'm saying?
Some unknown person may have gotten out of that car. Unknown person. There's no evidence that Mr. Offer is involved in this crime in any way. There's no evidence been presented to Offer under the nature and circumstances that he had knowledge, either before or during the commission of offense, or that he will participate in any way.
Dang.
So we're asking Your Honor not to consider the nature and the circumstances until they can tie Mr. Offer into the crime. What did he do? He could have been miles away with no, like I said, no participation or knowledge either before or during the commission of the offense, which would make him not responsible for the actions of others.
I'm sorry, continue, Mr.
Yes, no, and so getting into the history and characteristics of Mr. Offord, as counsel for the government conceded, many of the entries in his arrest history are long ago. 8 of the matters were SOL stricken from the court docket with no disposition. 4 of the items, 4 of the entries, there's an unknown disposition. There's a not guilty. There are supervisions, and there are 3 misdemeanors where he spent 2 days time considered served on those. What it really comes down to is an aggravated battery when he was 18 years old, 11 years ago or so. The not guilty should not be considered by the court. And then the home invasion in 16, where it lists no disposition, should not be considered by the court. The SOL is only one, or the BS, the bond forfeitures, only one of them resulted in a warrant being issued. So they must not have been that serious. Moving on, Your Honor, it doesn't indicate why the violation of probation was filed, sustained, and probation terminated unsatisfactory. It could have been a failure to pay a fine, punishing him because he's poor. We're asking you not to consider that. Mr. Offer has never been in the penitentiary. He's never been arrested for a gun or a weapons violation. He's never been arrested for gang activity or narcotic sales. They do have a delivery of some cannabis in his background, but certainly not the RICO gang violent organization operation. He does not fit that profile, and the data and the evidence in the report does not sustain, does not support that he's a danger to any persons in the community. They use his smoking marijuana as a reason for him to be detained. Smoking cannabis is legal. Again, non-compliance with the probation is listed in the report as a reason for not to let him fight the case from the outside. But we don't know what the violation of probation was for. Lack of verifiable employment. Half the world, it seems, has been unemployed during this global pandemic. That should not be held against him. And he doesn't have a stable residence. That should not be held against him. He holds no mortgage. He has family members. He doesn't have as stable an environment or a living place as many people do have. That should not be held against him. And so what we have is He's trending towards certainly, he has none of the violence in his background, as I noted. No gang activity, nothing that would tie him into the gang or this crime. What we have is now the government is relying upon the false answers on an application to get a loan. But the car, I mean, he's not involved with this crime. Why would he go buy a car in his own name, sign a contract, and then go drive that car that he bought, his name is on the paperwork, to go commit this crime? He's buying cars. He's not sticking people up with guns and shooting them and carjacking them. He's not armed robbing people for money. He filed the application and he bought a car. He doesn't fit the profile. He does not have any kind of a pattern of violence or weapons or gang activity. With all that, Your Honor, I'm asking on behalf of Mr. Offord that you allow him to not be detained and to fight the case from the outside. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Somerville. A couple questions for you, sir. One, do you agree that under the statute this is a rebuttable presumption case and that presumption suggests that your client should remain detained? Do you agree with that legal proposition?
Yes, Your Honor.
How do you propose rebutting the presumption? You went through and articulated things that you think are not there, but under the law presumes he should be detained. How do you propose rebutting that presumption?
YouTube family, as you can see, I see a determination over trust. What that means, die. Nah, I'm doing some battle rap stuff. Not to be corny, man, but it's a lot going on. You can clearly see folks in them is picking sides and choosing sides, and even the litigation department. You know, as I tell my daughter to stand right here and look at this news footage, do you approve of dudes allegedly telling on each other?
No.
Do you think there's some ramifications involving in this case?
Yes.
Okay, now you have a young one who knows the outcome of the law. And the outcome of the law is to remain visuals. Now, you even had the court situation. They had a lot to say about the trial. And it's not so easy as many people are making it.
And I'll start with Mr. Offord's address, looking at page 2 of the report as relayed to pretrial. I think this is really important, and this is gonna come up in the documents that I've tendered to the court and that I've tendered to Mr. Somerville as well. Mr. Offord, government believes, has made statements to pretrial, the people who would supervise him if the court were to give him pretrial release in this case. He's made statements to them that are not true with respect to where he lives. Looking at page 2 of the report, first full paragraph, Mr. Offord maintained that he's a lifelong resident of this district and had lived at the address which is listed on page 1 of the report for the past 2 years. Mr. Offord's mother and sister told pretrial that wasn't true. He didn't live at that address and he lived somewhere else. The FBI, throughout the course of this investigation, received court-approved authorization to use investigative methods to figure out where Mr. Offord was in fact residing, and it was not this address that's listed on page 1 of the report. It's close to the address where he was arrested. I say close to the address where he was arrested because the FBI, again, through investigative methods, figured out which unit Mr. Offord was living in. And during the course of this arrest, which, with respect to Mr. Offord's arrest, spanned about 40 minutes to an hour, we're knocking on the door of that residence. Mr. Offord was not there. He was in a different residence, which was upstairs, away from that one. It did not come out easily. FBI has reason to believe turned off his phone while they were knocking on the door of that other residence, but ultimately figured out where he was. And again, relating to the address that Mr. Offord would say is where he lived, in page 2 of the report, I submitted documents to the court. I tendered them to Mr. Somerville. Let's just call them Exhibit 1 and 2. I'll refer to the one that is a Small Business Administration application, at least a small portion of it, as Exhibit 1, and a Bank of America statement as Exhibit 2. I think this is relevant to the question of Mr. Offord's history and characteristics, particularly with respect to where he's living, because if Your Honor were to look at Exhibit 1, there's an address listed on this application, which is neither the address where he was arrested earlier this week or the address where he told pretrial he's been residing for the past 2 years. It's listed as both his personal address on the left side of the page and a business address on the right side of the page. Mr. Offord made some statements to pretrial, again, during this interview with respect to his employment. So looking down the first sentence under that sub-paragraph, it says Mr. Offord explained that he's been unemployed since 2019 and is financially supported by family. Page 1 of Exhibit 1 indicates that Mr. Offord represented to the Small Business Administration that he was a small business owner, that he had 7 employees, that he had a clothing and apparel business that grossed $73,000 in the past 12 months of the date of the application, which was June 24th of last year. And so if that's true, it's not something that he represented or told to pretrial about what his employment situation.
Okay, which is what is alleged in the indictment here. That is a critical member of that particular gang or enterprise. And so in that sense, this is a significant charge.
The arrests were made this morning, all charged in the murder of Carlton Weekly, a Chicago rapper known as FBG Duck, gunned down in broad daylight in August 2020 in Chicago's Gold Coast neighborhood during a feud between gangs. The 11-page indictment says the suspects used social media and music videos to promote and expand their enterprise. It also may have aided in the investigation.
It shows you exactly what's happening in the city, which is that people are threatening to commit acts of violence and then either bragging about acts of violence or talking about how they're going to retaliate for other acts of violence.
The consequences, obviously, in the federal system are much more punitive than you can get anywhere. It is going to send a strong message.
The 5 suspects also face federal firearm violations. Together, all 5 face a minimum of life behind bars if convicted. U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Illinois, John Lausch, calls it significant.
If this gives pause to them, then we're doing something good.
Man, y'all hit that like button, hit that notification bell. Come rock out with the most winningest team out here. I Smoke Hip Hop Live. Salute, gang. Remember, love your family, y'all. I really mean it. Love your family and your kids and always stay blessed. Truly indeed, man.